Nearly everyone agrees that when diabetes enters your life, it brings with it a host of physical afflictions. Organ failure, neuropathy, kidney failure, and blindness are just some of the big ones, but there are others. Not every diabetic has these problems as soon as he or she is diagnosed, and sometimes they may have one or two, but not the others. Some people may have painful neuropathy in their feet, but their eyesight is just fine. Others may have blurred vision, but everything else is okay. But generally, the longer you live as a diabetic with elevated blood sugar, the more of these maladies you're going to experience, and the worse they will get. Someone who's just been diagnosed at the age of 50 may feel pretty good, but at 60, he'll likely feel a lot worse, and at 70, he may be absolutely miserable. Professionals call these health problems associated with diabetes diabetic complications. And sometimes when someone dies from some of these problems, they are said to die from diabetic complications. Johnny Cash, for example, is said to have died of complications of diabetes at the relatively young age of 71. In his final years, he was nearly blind. He could barely walk, and he suffered constantly from tremendous pain. There are two factors that make a diagnosis of diabetes a terrible blow to any person. First, there are the complications that accompany it, and second is the sad reality that's being told you by nearly everybody that it's only going to get worse. This is summed up in the word progressive. Diabetes is said to be a progressive disease, which means it is a highway with no exit signs and no possibility of a U-turn. And the farther you drive down this highway, the more miserable you become. Now, I'm persuaded that this does not have to be the case for any of us. But before we talk about the solution, let's consider what it is specifically about the diabetic condition that results in such terrible physical maladies. There are basically three problems going on in the bodies of most type 2 diabetics, and each of them is a danger all by itself. The first and the most obvious problem is the elevated glucose, commonly known as blood sugar. And this is how doctors determine that you have diabetes. They will test your fasting blood sugar, or they will have you take an A1C test. And if your blood sugar is significantly higher than normal, they will tell you you are a diabetic. In America, diabetes is declared when your A1C test, which measures your blood sugar levels over the last 3 months or so, is at 6.5 or higher. A fasting glucose, which is consistently at or above 126 milligrams per deciliter, which is around 6.9 millimoles, is also an indicator of diabetes. Now, here's the simple truth. Consistently high glucose levels are destructive to your body. But there's an illusion that they are not that big of a deal because they're not immediately destructive. You can eat a couple of donuts and wash them down with a soda. You can have your blood sugar soar to 300 milligrams per deciliter, and you may still feel perfectly fine. It's not as though the minute your glucose goes high, you go blind, your feet start killing you, and your liver fails. Your body has been made extremely well by your Creator, and that means you can suffer from high glucose for a number of years before those terrible diabetic complications appear. But one thing is for sure. If you have high blood sugar and you keep it high day after day, month after month, and year after year, almost certainly your body will begin to fail at some point. The official name for the destructive nature of high glucose is glucose toxicity, which essentially means that high glucose is poisonous. By eating in a way that keeps your blood sugar too high, you're poisoning your body and doing yourself a world of harm. It may get you in 10 months or it may take 10 years, but sooner or later you will pay a high price for gradually and methodically poisoning your body with high blood sugar. A second source of misery for a type 2 diabetic is consistently high insulin levels, known as hyperinsulinemia. Now, that's puzzling for diabetics when they first hear it. After all, isn't the diabetic problem a lack of insulin? And don't doctors routinely prescribe insulin injections for severe diabetics? How can diabetics suffer from too much insulin? Well, the truth is, for most type 2 diabetics, their problem is not a lack of insulin. In fact, they usually have way too much insulin floating around in their bloodstream. The problem for them is that they have become severely insulin resistant, which means that insulin just simply doesn't work nearly as efficiently as it once did. It now takes more and more insulin to keep glucose levels normal, and their pancreas is forced to release twice as much insulin, or 3 times, or even 7 or 8 times as much as it used to in a valiant attempt to keep glucose levels low. And for a while, those blood sugar levels may not be too bad, but their insulin levels are off the charts in such cases, and researchers are convinced that this is not a healthy situation. And the result of high insulin is a state of insulin toxicity. These folks are poisoning themselves with dangerously high insulin levels, which can have terrible health effects on the entire body. This is a state of insulin toxicity, and it means a gradual poisoning of the body with insulin. Dr. Michael Eads writes this: in the appropriate amount, insulin keeps the metabolic system humming along smoothly with everything in balance. In great excess, it becomes a rogue hormone, ranging throughout the body, wreaking metabolic havoc, and leaving a trail of chaos and disease in its wake. So the high glucose levels and or high insulin levels, either one, can slowly poison your body. But there is yet another source of metabolic poison, and that is high blood sugar spikes. For some people, their blood sugar and maybe even their insulin levels aren't all that bad, but they experience very high blood sugar spikes at every meal that has a high amount of carbohydrates in it. Their A1C may not reveal to them that they are diabetic, but anytime they eat a high-carb meal, such as spaghetti with French bread and a sweet dessert afterward, their blood sugar jumps up to 200 or more. It may not stay up that long, but those constant glucose fluctuations up and down are damaging all by themselves, and what's more, they're usually an indication that worse things are in their future. So I've talked about 3 different means by which someone who is either diabetic or headed toward diabetes can poison themselves metabolically: through consistently high glucose, through consistently high insulin, and through consistently high glucose spikes after meals. If you have even one of these 3 going on, you're in trouble. If you have 2 out of the 3 happening, you're in bigger trouble still. And if you have all 3 of these things, high glucose, high insulin, and severe glucose spikes after your meals, you are a health disaster waiting to happen if it has not happened already. In other words, in terms of your health, you are a hot mess. Sadly, many health professionals focus on only one of these 3 conditions, and you know what that is? Well, you guessed it, the high glucose levels. They'll give you diabetic meds or have you inject yourself with insulin, or maybe they'll encourage you to take certain food supplements or herbs, which may bring blood sugar down a bit or maybe more than a bit. But that does not solve your problem. Yeah, it's better to have normal glucose levels than high glucose levels for sure, but if you ignore the high insulin levels and you pay no attention at all to your glucose spikes after your meals and snacks, you've not solved your problem. Imagine I'm out in the woods on a hike and 3 bears surround me, planning to have me for their dinner. I pick up a large rock and I hit one of them on the nose, and he gets scared and runs off. And I take great pride in my accomplishment, and I say to myself, I'm so smart and I have such great aim. I drove that bear off with a single stone. Well, maybe so, but I don't have that much room for pride. It's not the time for me to start feeling too good just yet. I may have driven off 1 bear, but there are still 2 other bears growling and snarling at me and getting closer and closer to me, intending for me to become their low-carb, high-protein dinner. I can't stop with just one of those bears. I need to deal with all 3 bears, and then I can start telling everybody about how I escaped from certain death. There are numerous means by which blood sugar can be lowered. Insulin injections can do it. Food supplements such as bitter melon or berberine may help, and various diabetic meds can make a difference. But by themselves, they're not going to overcome the heart of your problem, which is insulin resistance. They're not going to deal with the hyperinsulinemia and the fatty liver. You are not out of danger yet, not at all. So by being totally focused, tunnel focused on your glucose levels, you'll never be out of the woods. You'll never be free from diabetic complications. The truth is that all three of those situations, high glucose, high insulin, and high blood sugar spikes, all bring health miseries by themselves and diabetic complications with them, and all of these must be dealt with before you really can claim victory in your life. And the only thing that addresses all three of these, you guessed it, is a major reduction of carbohydrates in your diet, with some time-restricted eating thrown in as an additional weapon. This powerful 1-2 punch lowers glucose, lowers insulin response, and devastates extreme blood sugar spikes. You end up with gentle blood sugar rises, not spikes, after your meals, and by going to 2 low-carb meals a day with no snacks in between, instead of 3 or 4 or 5 high-carb meals with snacks, you do away with all those spikes. Your body begins to relax. It's no longer under the incredible stress of high carbs with the resulting high blood sugar spikes and the incredibly high insulin responses. And lo and behold, your glucose numbers start to drop. Your A1C improves significantly. In fact, often so significantly that doctors are amazed and they will ask you, "What have you done?" And if they have any sense at all, they'll say something like, "Well, whatever you're doing, keep on doing it. It is working." You'll stop getting those shaky feelings that made you feel so miserable. And guess what? You'll find that diabetes is not nearly so progressive as you were led to believe. In fact, for you, diabetes will progress in reverse. Things will start getting better instead of worse. You will enjoy the blessing of blood sugar retreating, insulin levels normalizing, and post-meal glucose spikes becoming a thing of the past. You can do it. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to have a will of iron. All you need is some basic information, some motivation, and of course, the grace of God. Attack diabetes on all three fronts and watch those monsters run away in terror. We are in the process of beginning a new challenge for this fall called Beat Diabetes by Christmas. This challenge officially begins on September the 1st, but you need to sign up now so you'll be registered and ready to start. So what does the challenge involve? Well, it is essentially a 4-month boot camp that we hope will take you from diabetic numbers to non-diabetic by the end of this year. You'll be receiving weekly emails from me with links to videos done by me and others and various tips with one thing in mind: to crush diabetes and see your blood sugar levels and insulin levels begin to normalize. You'll be introduced to a lifestyle that has helped thousands of people get their A1C below the diabetic threshold of 6.5. I cannot guarantee this will be the case for you, but I can say this. Based on my experience interacting with thousands of diabetics, I'm convinced that you are more likely than not to have a non-diabetic A1C by Christmas. I'm asking you to invest one short 4-month period of your life in your own health and in defeating diabetes and driving this monster far from your door. To sign up for the Beat Diabetes by Christmas Challenge 2023, click on the link that's in the description. God bless you.